Getting the hang of it now.
Professional. Welcome to the Hackaday podcast. I'm Elliot Williams. I'm managing editor of Hackaday.
And I'm Tom Nardi, contributing editor.
This is episode 145. Remoticon is on, and we'll be talking about movie effects, cold plasma, and the Purest silicon. If you are listening to this now, if you have just downloaded the podcast, then it is 9 a.m. on the West Coast, and you have exactly 2 hours until the start of this year's Remoticon. Podcast is about an hour, so you could still listen to the podcast, but then you've got to go grab a bite to eat and head over to Hackaday because the Remoticon starts and it looks awesome this year.
Yeah, I'm very excited. You know, obviously we'd all rather be in person, but we've put a lot of excellent stuff together for this year for the Remoticon, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for everybody. And you don't have to leave the house, right? So that's always an advantage.
Exactly. I guess first off, the 3 keynote speakers are fantastic and varied. The whole program is like each of those talks I kind of want to see. But then there's all the other goofy stuff that we've thrown along with it, including Tom, you basically did most of the work behind setting up our Discord server.
Yeah, I thought that was, it's high time. It seems like everybody's on Discord. I remember writing a daily about Discord a year or two back, and at the time everybody's like, "Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it." So it looks new and scary to me. But it's sort of become like the de facto for these kind of virtual events. And it's got all kinds of cool stuff in there for you to hang out and chat and just have a good time. You'll be able to ask questions to the presenters through there. There's a schedule inside of Discord, which is actually really neat. You don't have to, but you can RSVP for each event. And if you do that, you'll get a notification before it goes live so you don't miss anything.
Makes you like a little custom sub schedule. I thought that was really sweet.
If you do multiple ones, it'll actually print you out like a little schedule that you can put in your pocket or something.
Yeah, totally.
Very cool stuff.
No, and it'll be kind of the back channel for people talking and hanging out while it's all going on. Of course, we're also streaming to YouTube Live. The thing I'm most excited about that's all new this time is the Gather Town based Bring a Hack. And it's like I guess it's like Zelda or like some top-down scroller, except when you get near to people, you start video conferencing with them.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It reminds me of the art style like the Pokemon games, where your little guy walks around and then you walk up to somebody who's just sitting at a table and all of a sudden like pop and you got a video feed. And I think it'll make a lot more sense once you're in a whole virtual room full of these people, because you can kind of just naturally gravitate to different conversations, hang out a little bit, see what they're showing, and then just move on to the next one. I think it's going to work really, really well. I do know that space is supposed to be pretty limited in that, so if you want to present something, once you get the email, don't delay.
Yeah, that one's brutal for me because I'm in Europe, and that means it's at 3 in the morning. And I was joking with Mike about it last night about I really want to see it. It's not going to be streamed live. It's impossible to stream live.
Right.
Everything's going on at once, right? So, I don't want to miss this. I think I'm going to set an alarm for 3 in the morning. Come up here. I'm going to be scrolling around. Wazza. If you see someone who's half asleep watching all the hacks, that would be me. Anyway, if it is Friday and you are listening to this podcast around when it comes out, you can finish listening and then head on over to Remoticon because we want to see you there. The talks are fantastic. If it is somehow not Friday and you're listening to the podcast late, you've missed Remoticon, don't fret. You can always just pull up the individual videos and we'll probably break out the talks for you. So you'll be able to go through it all. Don't fret if you missed it, but you missed out on interacting with everyone, and that is a sadness. So head on over to Remoticon right now.
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
And it's time for this week's What's That Sound? I've decided to finally stop doing video games and do something a little bit geekier. Have a listen to this sound, Tom Nardi, and see if you can guess it. No pressure.
This is spooky. This is we missed for Halloween on this one. Man, I want to say some kind of atmospheric radio thing, maybe?
That's an extraordinarily good guess, but that with a twist. So if you happen to know what the sound is, or you just want to take a wild-ass guess, head on over to the show notes. You'll find a link. Fill out the form. We'll take the right answers, pick someone out randomly, and send them a limited edition Hackaday t-shirt. All right, let's start talking hacks. What have you got up first this week, Tom?
This is something that's I found really fascinating. It's called OpenGL Machine Learning Runs on Low-End Hardware. And the idea here is, we've heard of GPU accelerated stuff like CUDA, but you need to have a high-end graphics card, and they're hard enough to find normally. Now with chip shortages, and you're not necessarily going to have that on something like the Raspberry Pi, a single-board computer. So the effort here is to recreate some of that machine learning capability using GPU shaders through OpenGL. And shaders are basically little packets of code that would normally be used for manipulating textures and doing shadows and that kind of stuff for games. But here they've kind of been pushed into service doing what you'd consider normal, like machine learning kind of tasks. This isn't some pie in the sky theory either. The developer, Instadrum, actually has a library out right now that you can play with. It's been out for a while now. And you could do some stuff like neural net upscaling of images, where it'll fill in the extra graphical data instead of looking like a mess when you upscale it. You could do image recognition, all that kind of stuff. But you could do it on basically anything that has a halfway decent modern graphics system. So you could do it on like the Raspberry Pi Zero. You can do it on Android phones. If it shows graphics, there's an excellent chance you can use this library on it. And it opens up a lot of possibilities. Try to do image recognition on the original Pi Zero, forget about it. It just doesn't have the oomph for it. But using this, they're able to do respectable, a few images a second rate for image recognition, which is a lot better than zero.
Yeah, no, I'm one of those people who's hit by this whole Bitcoin-driven graphics card price escalation crud, because I've been wanting to do a series on artificial neural networks, on machine learning, and I'm totally down with it, except I don't have a fancy-ass graphics card. And trying to run this stuff on a CPU-only computer, it's just not parallel enough, and everything is so darn slow. And so you really do need a graphics card. And this has really been bumming me out because, the graphics card I want to get is $1,000. And yeah, so I really am interested in seeing how this works. I don't know how it stacks up with buying one of those little, USB based accelerator things that you can pick up these days, like the Coral or I can't remember all their names.
The developer on here, he doesn't promise the world, it's clear this is not the most efficient way or the fastest way, but to be able to do something that you couldn't do before is sort of the goal. I mean, if you have the ability to hit one of those little USB accelerators, then that's probably going to be the better choice. And obviously, there's going to be more software that supports it, more information out there. But the fact that you could do some of this stuff with nothing more than what's on the single board computer is enough to dig you out of a hole. If you got some little project that you just need to recognize a couple pictures, and you're not trying to recreate the wheel. It's very exciting. I hope we see a lot more of it. He actually mentions that relatively new versions of OpenGL actually have what they call compute shaders, which are for like arbitrary code. But this library, the idea was to support some of those older, like the chipset in the Raspberry Pi Zero is ancient. It's from 2007 or something. He wasn't actually able to use that new function, so he had to go back and it supports I think OpenGL 2.0, which is quite old. I think I think Hackaday had just started when that came out. So the idea that you could be doing, even at a reduced rate, you could be doing any kind of machine learning stuff on something that old is pretty exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll have to give it a look.
The image in the article, that's not like just some GIMP trickery. That is literally using this software to upscale the image.
Who did that?
That was me. I wrote this one.
So you've actually run this on a Raspberry Pi. What were you running on?
I did it on my desktop, but I have integrated.
Cool.
I got integrated graphics on the desktop, so it's kind of a similar thing. I don't have any CUDA NVIDIA stuff, so I just like cut out like a 200 by 200 image of Joe's art and doubled it through this thing.
That's awesome.
If you try to take that original and like scale it up in GIMP, it looks horrendous because it looks all pixelated.
It's line art, so it's going to get all pixely blocky where it shouldn't.
Yeah, it really did work very well. I mean, I was able to download his library on the desktop, configure, make. It built it, no problem. And with no dedicated graphics card, I was able to do that neural net upscaling. I was very impressed.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Nardi tested, Hackaday approved.
I put my stamp on it.
All right, my first hack today is a math video. It's Nemian's hacking multiplication with Karatsuba's algorithm. And this gets mathy nerdy really quick, but I thought it was interesting because it was something that I didn't know about, and I'll try to explain it in my hand-wavingly best way. The idea here is that when you do multiplication, if you think about like multiplying 2 3-digit numbers by each other by hand, what you do is you take the least significant number and then you multiply it by the least significant one of the one above, and then the middle one, and then the one at the other side. And then you move on to the middle digit in the lower number, and then you do that again, right? And so you always do this thing where you're multiplying one pair of numbers together, and then you shift them over in funny ways and add them up. The point here is that this multiplying each element of one number by each element of another means that you're doing n times n operations if n is the number of digits, and that makes multiplication n squared. And this was Kolmogorov's conjecture. He said, I think that you can't do better than the way we all do multiplication by hand, better than this like order n squared operation. Karatsuba at this point in time was really young and figured out a better way to do it. And his method is really a little bit crazy, convoluted, difficult to operationalize for humans. The intuition is that when you do multiplication, normally you're multiplying all the pairs and then you're adding them together. Karatsuba's algorithm, instead of multiplying the digits together and then adding them, you add them together and then multiply them. And that gives you the weird cross products. So if you have like A plus B times C plus D, you get the A times B, and then you get the cross ones in the middle, and then you get the B times D, right? Yeah, you can kind of buy that. The point is, by doing the addition before the multiplication, you get all of these cross products kind of for free. And you get the first one you want and the last one you want, but the middle ones are kind of mixed up. But then you can reapply the same algorithm to it to get the middle ones figured out. And so if you have 3 digits, it works out in 2 iterations. But if you have like 10-digit numbers, it takes a lot more iterations to get the whole solution out of it. But it's all just doing the same procedure where you add the digits together instead of multiplying them, and then you multiply them against each other. It's really clever. It's definitely not something you'd want to do by hand, but it beats Kolmogorov's conjecture. It's order less than n to the 1.6 instead of n squared. So it's a slightly faster way to do math when you're multiplying 2 really big numbers together.
I'm glad you picked this one, and the onus to explain it was on yourself, because I certainly I wouldn't even know where to begin with this one. But yeah, it was really cool. I liked in the comments, I don't know if you put a figure on it, but in the comments they said like the rule of thumb is that this makes sense when you're multiplying numbers that are longer than like 300 and something bits. Like, so this is real big numbers. Like, not, there's no reason for you to ever do this. But if you're doing something that, like you said, cryptography or something that needs a lot of,
yeah, that's the one thing, right? Is like, it's an easy to operationalize algorithm. Like, it's recursive. Computers love doing recursive crap. I don't know why. I hate recursion, but computers love it. But the cryptography is the real key here. Like, the one time you want to be multiplying ridiculously long numbers by each other is cryptography. And that's where this maybe does make sense.
My next one was exploring the healing power of cold plasma. This is from Jay Bowles, which Hackaday readers probably will know as the host of Plasma Channel. He'll be doing a talk at Remoticon, too. he's a high voltage experimenter. Everything that makes sparks is his game. And this time around, he is creating a room temperature plasma using a helium tank and one of his existing high voltage generators. Other than just looking cool and being able to touch it with your bare hand, the application of cold plasma, and this is something that he talks about in the video that the European Space Agency has been looking into for a while, is it is able to sterilize a surface without damaging it. You can use it to, spray around inside of a spaceship or something and kill all the germs, which is something that obviously they're very interested in for space flight and that kind of stuff. And in the comments, some people have even said that they've seen similar things in use in some European hospitals already. So it could be already coming down from space and helping us lowly Earthlings. But, it's a cool little cold plasma wand that he's made. And what I really liked with this one is that, it wasn't just to look at. Jay actually got some growth plates and he, inoculated it with bacteria, and he hit it with the cold plasma and then left the control alone and, comes back to it a few weeks later. And, lo and behold, the area that was hit with the cold plasma has no bacterial growth in it. Very promising. He's not saying stop washing your hands and start using helium and high voltage, but I thought it was really cool that he could recreate this using very little material and demonstrate it using, scientific method, at least as far as it applies to YouTube videos.
I'll admit the thing I like about it is that it's awesome looking.
Yeah.
It makes this like blue, but also pink because of the helium, like this pink blue plasma. And there's one point in the video where he's putting his finger in it because it's a cold plasma. It actually is okay for human skin. But there's this one bit where he's putting his finger in it. I'm like, no, because it looks like an open flame. It looks like he's about to burn his finger off. Of course it doesn't. Now the problem with this for sterilizing stuff is that it's a tiny little pinpoint of a jet in the end, right? Like this isn't gonna, maybe you could make some kind of a thick multi-pronged wand out of it or something, but
yeah, you can see because he did do some nice close-up of the growth plates afterwards, and it is super, super localized. Like, and he said also, he's burning helium the whole time. So he's like he can't sit there all day covering the whole petri dish. So like he's kind of on a time crunch. Right. So he can only go in a circle like right in the center, and then in the end, there's limited bacterial growth outside of that circle, but it is really just the exact center that is sanitized. So it's almost like a sanitizing pen. Like unless you drag it right over the surface, it isn't really doing anything. And it's interesting, he does compare that to hot plasma. Like he just puts like a Tesla coil or something on one of the other growth plates, and that works, but also blows a hole in the growth medium. So he's like, well, you could do that, but it's got limited surfaces that you can hit with that sort of power.
All of his hacks are basically fairly accessible. Like you have to get your hands on a high voltage power supply and or build one. He's got tons of videos explaining how you can scavenge stuff and or build your own. But the rest of it is what? It's a helium from a balloon store or something.
Nothing crazy.
And a little pipette. Like there's nothing tricky here in a way.
I really like that about his videos too, where they kind of brings it down to earth. He breaks it down in a way and shows, what you can do with literally hardware store parts. And this is another one too where I like in the comments, some people brought up some good points. Because, they were saying to really prove it's effective, he should try to do a run with the power off to see if maybe it was just blasting the growth plates with helium that was actually keeping it growing. And somebody even said, like, maybe they treat the tanks with some kind of cleaning agent, and you were inadvertently spraying a cleaning agent on the petri dish, and so they, if you're gonna be scientific, you got to take these things into account. At the end of this video, he does mention that he's not done with this subject. He's going to look into it some more. So I'd like to see him maybe address some of those things in the next video to try to take out some of those other possibilities and prove that it really is the plasma.
The next hack is a book. This is Designing Electronics That Work by Hunter Scott. This is not a small book. This is basically a labor of love. It looks like Hunter is a professional electrical engineer / designer and just wanted to get down everything you might need to know about if you're getting into electronics. And that's what I thought was awesome about it. It is super broad. It, has some great tips on prototyping. The section on selecting components is fantastic. Schematic design, layout, how to design for cost, fabrication, testing, what you need to build up a lab. The troubleshooting section is also really good. None of these are very long on their own. It's extremely concise and really pleasant reading. I think I got off on the wrong foot with it in a little way. I started off at the beginning in chapter 1, and it's pretty clear that Hunter is an engineer, and viewed from my kind of like dilettante hacker perspective, engineers seem like accountants to me. Like they're really worried about making sure stuff works and making sure it works cheap and on time and right. And the first chapter is all of that engineering stuff. If you're a hacker type, you can just skip over the first chapter and go straight to the bits. And I encourage that if you don't care about how to predict schedules accurately. Of course, he would look at me and be like, this guy's a Yahoo. What's he doing? Like, he just starts off doing something without planning it. What's he thinking? And the answer is, yeah, I'm a Yahoo. But it's got great tips for, I think, basically everyone. I was just randomly reading through. I was in the radio frequency connectors section. The radio frequency section in this is like 6 pages long. It's really short, but it has this phenomenally helpful table that gives you all of the frequency ranges that different connectors are good for. So if you need to know if you need an SMA connector for that circuit, this will tell you. And there's just all sorts of little tidbits and charts, and he's got rules of thumb for like how many extra components you should buy, and they're broken down by cost. So he's like, if it's cheaper than this, you should buy 50% more than you think you need. And if they're super expensive, it's just a couple more than you need, et cetera, et cetera. And these are really great tips to kind of help you out if you're starting in the game to figure out how to get some of the stuff that otherwise would take a lifetime of experience to build up.
And I think it's important, especially, for the listeners, like when we say a book, like it is an actual book. I mean, the meaning of words tend to blur anymore, right? Like
That's right.
This isn't like some blog posts that he ran a Python script over and made a PDF. Like this is a proper book. Like I was blown away. Like, I mean, it is phenomenally professionally put together. It's a pay as you wish kind of thing. So you can get the PDF for free, but I mean, Hunter put the work in. I would not be shy to throw him some coffee money. I mean, this was a total labor
Absolutely.
of love. You can even get it printed. I don't know if you saw that on the site. You can actually get it like a print on demand thing. I think it was like $30 or something. Just browsing through it, I was honestly thinking, maybe I'd get a physical copy. I mean, there's just an incredible amount of information in there, and it's the kind of thing that you would have on the shelf and consult from time to time.
Where Art of Electronics got kind of famous in our circles for being hands-on and applicable, but still doing the theory, this does even less theory, and it's much more kind of real-world, this is what you need to know about ceramic capacitors kind of thing, so it's not going to teach you how transistors work, but it'll teach you which transistors you need to pick for your project and why. So it's a really great complement to a lot of the other books you've got sitting on your bookshelf. It's not an intro book per se. Like,
No.
It's aimed at like a working junior design engineer, but it's still accessible. It's a really, really nice book. And, you can download it for free. You could throw him some money. You can get it printed out. Like, you can't write a 300-page book about electronics without putting some of your own opinions in there. And that I also really liked. But this book is like encyclopedic and 300 pages long, and it's talking about something that we all care about. Definitely worth having a look if you are at all interested in upping your electronics building game. I read through about maybe a fifth of it, and there were nuggets left, right, and center. You should do the same.
I was surprised to see an article about Terminator 2 this week on Hackaday. Surprised, but not certainly not mad about it. Donald Papp wrote this one titled "Those Bullet Effects in Terminator 2 Weren't CGI." And it starts with talking about how Stan Winston put together the, now iconic effects in Terminator 2, where you had, the liquid metal Terminator and the bullets were hitting them and it did this like ripple. Given the time the movie came out, I think probably most of us had an idea it was some kind of practical effect, but being able to see how they did it and how they, he talks about how they were shooting bullets into mud to see how the surface would react, and then they used metallized foam to create these kind of almost like flower looking impact craters that would pop out of the
Right.
It's an amazing amount of engineering that went into this, and it always kind of fascinates me about this is that, it's not like you could go and ask somebody, it looked like somebody shot a liquid robot, these people are doing it the first time it's ever been done. I mean, everything they had to do was groundbreaking. There was no prior art. There was no, you don't go on YouTube and look it up or whatever. You have to come up with this stuff. And it's an incredible amount of skill and talent to engineer these practical effects, and especially because they got to hide under the actor's clothes, and they got to make sure they trigger at the right moment. And I mean, even watching the animation, even after you read about it and you look at the animation, I still don't really see how it pops out of his shirt the way they talk about it. It's so incredibly well done. And then of course in the movie with everything going on and lights and the action, you'd never in a million years see this thing pop out of his shirt. If you had somebody doing this today, right, and you even see that because they're still making these Terminator movies for who knows what reason, but if you said, okay, well, I got to have a liquid robot, they would say, okay, well, we'll warm up the render farm. Like, it would never even be a question. Like, it's going to be done in CG.
Right.
And it might look okay, but I promise you, in 15, 20 years, nobody's going to look back and be like, wow, they really knocked it out of the park with that. It's not going to age like a real effect. And you see that in stuff like, watch Jurassic Park, the original. And to me, I would put the original Jurassic Park up against, Jurassic World, the new one. I mean, like, you just can't do better than an actual real T-Rex head hanging over the actors, And it kind of talks about that in the comments, that this is like a lost art as we move more and more towards CG. And I get it, it's cheaper, it's easier, you could tweak it, as we do more and more of that, like this kind of impromptu engineering is going to disappear, and it's a shame. And I'm glad that at least this stuff was documented so that we could still see how how it was done, and for the filmmakers who still want to kind of take that more authentic approach, like the information's out there. I mean, I hope we never get away from having these kind of practical effects, but time marches on and got to meet deadlines, so
Yeah, right? I don't know. I mean, there's always Halloween. And like this came out shortly after Halloween, and I was like, I first saw it and I'm like, oh, this is the coolest Halloween costume I've ever seen. How did they do that? They look just like the effects from the movie. And yeah, well, duh, Elliot. But what's really cool about it is that they're done with foam rubber and chromed, and they're actually like, it has to expand out. So it's like this compressed up foam flowery splash shape that's like put in some kind of a capsule. They don't actually show us that part, but then it's vacuum metallized. So it's got an actual, it's like, the metallized Mylar stuff. It's actually shiny metal looking, and it's made out of foam rubber. And so they just like pop the little thing open, and it like unfolds out into this giant splashy metal wound.
Instantaneously. Like it's
Yeah, you could do this for Halloween. This would stand up to like live one-on-one scrutiny in a way that would freak out whoever's doorbell you just rang. Last up this week, for all their expense, electric cars are still the cheapest. This was an interesting study by a European car rental company called LeasePlan, but basically they look at the cost of owning a gas car versus the cost of owning an electric car, and for the first time in history, come out with the conclusion that in the expensive and middle-priced classes of cars across most of Europe, the total cost of owning a car per year, and so it's things like depreciation, but also maintenance and cost of fuel / electricity, is actually cheaper for electric cars now. And this is mostly due to the fact that the cost of running an electric car is cheaper, but also the resale prices of electric cars on the used market has gone up as people are starting to want to buy more used electric cars. And so electric cars are becoming, a lot more like gas cars. And I actually pitched this to Jenny because Jenny wrote a column a few weeks ago about how electric cars are so much more expensive. And of course, that's true too. There is a premium on electric cars. They sell for more initially. And so how do you reconcile these two? Well, if you buy the car and then use it for a couple years and then sell it, the electric car may cost a lot more initially, but you can also sell it for that much more when it comes time to sell it. And that actually makes the two even out. It's starting to look like, contrary to what you might expect, despite their higher upfront costs, electric cars are now getting to the point where it makes sense to buy them from a pocketbook perspective as well.
So I didn't find this particularly surprising at all. The maintenance is almost nil on an electric car, realistically. I mean, you still have brakes, consumable stuff like that. You got to change the brake pads and that kind of stuff. But think of how many systems are just deleted. Think back of the maintenance or the repairs you've had on your own car. Those things don't exist. Now, there's no muffler to rot out. There's no fuel lines to leak. There's no oil changes. Well, there might be. There's probably some kind of oil change, but certainly not at the same.
Something's got to be lubricated.
Yeah, certainly not at the same kind of regularity. All of those classic maintenance things are out the window now. And granted, they're going to be replaced with their own proprietary things, and you probably got to go to the dealer because it's going to be a sort of thing you won't be able to do yourself. But on the whole, there's just a lot fewer things to go wrong, right? So looking at it from that standpoint, sure, maintenance is less. And obviously, we have the benefit of very cheap electricity, depending on where you are. But for a lot of us, it's very cheap electricity. But I think it also really depends on the individual. And I would go as, at the risk of painting with too broad a brush, I would say the average Hackaday reader is probably the kind of person who would, maybe crack the hood once in a while and do their own maintenance on their car. And for them, the price doesn't necessarily come out to the same value, if you're doing your own work on your car. And I think we saw that a lot in the comments too, because there are a lot of people in the comments saying, listen, I bought a 10-year-old car and I do all my own maintenance on it, and it costs me almost nothing to operate. How could it be cheaper for me to buy an electric car? But I think that in the end, those aren't the people that this paper is talking about. If you're driving a 10-year-old car and you're doing your own work, then you're in your own kind of price bracket. This is, like you said, fleets and leases and people. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that buy a car, keep it for 2-3 years, and then get a new one. That's just the way they are. They don't want to deal with the headaches. They want to always have the newest model. And if that's you, then sure, this makes a lot of sense. Especially if you're moving it before you got to start considering, replacing the battery pack, which is something that the comments brought up a lot too.
That was something that a lot of people in the comments, I think, misunderstood a little bit. And this is where, as Hackaday's staff economist, I have to bring up, because some people are like, well, you got to sell it before the battery pack expires. But the person you're selling it to is going to know that the battery pack is 8 years old in this car. So they're not going to be a sucker. When electric cars were brand new, there was a lot of fear about how long the battery packs would last. And I know in my experience from my personal friends, this hasn't come to pass. Everybody said in 8 years, in 10 years, the battery will just keel over and you'll have to buy a new one. And that hasn't happened to anyone I know. And all of the manufacturers' estimates are 200,000 miles on the battery. Some are down around 100,000, but these are reasonable lifespans for a part of a car. I don't know, your fuel pump isn't going to last 100,000 miles. You'll swap it out before then.
Yeah.
And so I think the point the economic point to make, though, is that if the battery were this ticking time bomb that's going to explode, the next guy down the line wouldn't be paying you top dollar for that used electric car. And on the other hand, it looks like they are. So I think the market has kind of priced out this fear of the battery falling apart completely like that. And I think that's kind of proof that it isn't actually happening.
Well, yeah, you put it well. It's not a time bomb, right? It's not like one day you're gonna go out there and be like, oh, guess we're not going to work today. The battery's done. But you do see like diminishing returns, as the battery packs get older. I think some of the cars even show that on the dash. It'll even say like, you used to get this many miles and now you're getting this. Right. So there's life in it. And then of course, as we've seen too with different articles we've done on the site, there's whole communities that will buy cars with, old packs just to replace them with cheaper aftermarket packs too. So but you could even have people looking for that. You put a lot of miles on your pack and it's, you're not getting the performance you used to. Somebody out there might be exactly looking for that exact situation because they got a pack from another car that they're going to, flash the firmware on and they'll let them install it. There's all kinds of stuff like that out there. So yeah, there's definitely value.
And I find it a little bit surprising that of all places on the Hackaday comments, people are like, but there's no way you can work on an electric car. Like, an electric car is this awesome electric system. Like, this is the thing we should be wanting to work on. It's not these horrible, greasy, ill-contained explosions like internal combustion engines are. This is the stuff we know about. This is big, beefy MOSFETs and stuff. I don't know. I know that there's a lot more involved in this, and we've actually shown some hacks where people replace batteries, or there was one where they were replacing the converter that goes from DC to AC for the motors and getting more horsepower out of the car by trading these parts out. Like, I don't think this stuff is impossible for the kind of motivated and electrically knowledgeable home gamer to tweak with, and I think it's only going to get more so in the future.
Yeah, I mean that's true. It does, of course, depend who made your electric car. We know that Tesla is particularly unkind to people doing modifications and that sort of thing, and they go out of their way to stop it. But yeah, in theory, we should be really into this kind of stuff, and hopefully, as this becomes more common, the manufacturer will be more accepting of the fact that there are people going to be modifying and working on it. I know, Ford is coming out with like an electric crate motor that they intend, for retrofits and stuff that they'll just sell you the motor and you put it into your own vehicle. So I mean that's a very
cool,
promising sign from a major manufacturer that like there's going to be DIY electric cars, just like, you got project cars now. Like that's not going to go away. That whole community isn't just going to fold up because we're not using gasoline anymore. So there's always going to be people who want to push the envelope. They want to do their custom things. And I think the manufacturers that embrace that are going to see the success and hopefully keep it coming, All right, my first quick hack is Arduino library makes it digital rain like it's 1999. There's a new Matrix movie coming out next month, and to help celebrate, Eric Nam has come up with a really cool Arduino library that lets you create the film's iconic digital rain with ESP8266 or 32 and just a generic TFT display. So if you're looking for something to decorate the workshop with, it's definitely a project to check out. Up next, M5 Paper gets open source weather display firmware. The M5 Paper is sort of an all-in-one development device. It's got a battery, it's got sensors, it's got everything you need, all in a nice little case. Volos Projects came up with a open source firmware for it that turns it into a very slick-looking weather display. I mean, this is something that you'd be happy to have on your desk, as is. It also makes for a great project to use to build into something new. And finally, low-cost computer gesture control with an I2C sensor. We've seen these little $10 gesture control sensors floating around for a while, and Norbert Zaire paired one up with a DigiSpark to create a little USB human interface device. And for the cost of a sandwich, you can control your computer like you're in Minority Report or Iron Man or any of the other wild arm flailing films that you've seen over the last few years.
My first quick hack is super useful, quick and not very dirty negative voltage supply. This is Philip Purest looking at one of those $1 LM2596 based buck power converter circuits. The trick here is that you're connecting the negative from the input to the positive on the output and then pulling the lower voltage off of that. He works through the whole circuit and figures out how to add a couple more components to optimize this and make a really nice little power supply. Next up, Xenon John. Teensy MIDI air harp sounds huge. This is a cool air harp. It's basically just a custom MIDI controller. This one is built with 8 infrared distance sensors and a thumb joystick for bending and sliding. A Teensy reads the distance to your hand above each of these 8 sensors and actually assigns different notes depending on how close or how far you are, which gives a really interesting playable effect when you're playing this thing. And again, it's like the Jean-Michel Jarre laser harp, but just no lasers. You could add lasers. Last up, Jigglypuff sensor breathes CO2 so you don't have to. This is a cute hack by Kutluhan Akhtar. It is a Jigglypuff Pokemon shaped circuit board with a bunch of modules plugged into it. Why would you do this? I have no idea. It's like a really cool badge, but the parts are just kind of plugged into it wild style. It makes it look even more random and somehow just works with a giant pink electro Jigglypuff for your desk. I have no idea. All right, and that brings us to this week's Can't Miss articles. These are articles written by our own fantastic Hackaday writers. What'd you pick, Tom?
So I picked one that I imagine a lot of people have already heard about in the traditional media. That is Russia's anti-satellite weapon causing trouble for the International Space Station and really for anything in orbit around the Earth. So this is not good news.
No.
And unfortunately, it's something that keeps seeming to happen. We keep blowing satellites up, even though everybody's on the same page. It's a very bad idea. And I don't think it's any conspiracy theory to say that you know the only reason you do this is to show everybody else that you can do it.
That's right.
You know, you blow up a satellite. You make sure it's your own satellite so you don't cause a war. But you pick one of your own dead satellites and you blow it up, and then you act like it's not a big deal, just so that everybody else on the planet knows that you can blow up a satellite of your choosing whenever you wish. It's like classic saber rattling. And, to be fair, the United States has done this. Everybody at this point, if you could, pretty much everyone who's been able to get a rocket into space has also blown up a satellite, which is just unfortunate. Yeah.
Russia, China, India, and the U.S.
Yeah, we've all done it, but at least, in the United States defense, we haven't done it recently. And officially, the last, I think it was, 2008 or something, the argument was that if the satellite was allowed to come down in one piece, it had too much fuel on it, and it was like toxic hydrazine fuel, and they said it could have been a danger, yada yada, who knows. But at least they had an argument and they announced it. Like this is what we need to do, and this is what's happening. Everybody, buckle up. This was just out of the blue. Russia decided to blow up some Soviet satellite that's been up there minding its own business since the 80s. The thing that's crazy is, this made this debris cloud. The crew on the International Space Station had to, get into their capsules in case they had to make a hasty exit. There's Russian cosmonauts up there. So how do you feel? If you're that guy, how do you feel? Like, you get the call that, hey guys, we just blew up a satellite to show off to the United States and China. You guys might want to strap
hop in your Soyuz.
Hopefully nothing happens to you, but it is what it is. It's very irresponsible. It's not what any spacefaring nation should be doing right now. And we've had all kinds of turmoil with the Russians on the space station in the last couple of years. It really does seem like they are trying to make it as difficult as possible to work with them. At least for the United States to work with them. They've already made some deals with China, and it seems like the future is really going to be like a Chinese-Russian team up, whether it's a new space station or going to the moon or whatever. So it's just unfortunate that things had to fall apart and that politics needs to pollute, what should be just a purely scientific endeavor.
If you view this from the perspective that the Russians are pulling out of the space station right now, it's even more ominous. Like we were talking last night about how could they do this when it would potentially endanger their own cosmonauts up there. And I think that's the real warning. When the Russian cosmonauts move out of ISS, that is the warning, right? Like, because what stops them then from detonating another satellite nearby and just taking the thing down? I don't know. It really does worry me a little bit about what their intentions are going to be after this. This is too dark, man. This is way too dark.
It is. Every one of these tests is going to make like a no-go zone for years.
Yeah.
And it just makes things so much more complicated because now there's going to be another spot on the map that you can't really safely operate in because you're going to get hit with an M3 nut that got ejected from the satellite 10 years ago. You know, and that's all it takes. I mean, a little nut or a bolt hitting you at orbital velocity is that's pretty much game over.
It's a bullet.
Yeah. We can't afford any of this. Like there is really, really no practical reason to do this, even if the satellite was causing some kind of danger to the space station or something, which by all accounts, to be clear, no one has any reason to think that this satellite was going to cause any problems for anybody. It's been sitting up there since the 80s. But even if it was something was going to happen, we need to come up with better ways of handling this stuff. You know, you need to go up there and you need to grab it and deorbit it or shoot it up higher, like on an escape trajectory away from the Earth, something like that. Just blowing it up in place is definitely not the answer.
My can't miss article this week is Mining and Refining Pure Silicon and the Incredible Effort It Takes to Get There. And this was a great article by Dan Maloney looking into how the silicon that makes everything around you computery run is harvested and then refined and turned into silicon wafers. And this is an incredible story of kind of simple mining at the beginning and then this insane reaction that purifies silicon and turns it into these pure silicon crystals. Polycrystalline silicon is measured by the nines, right? So if it's 7 nines pure, it's 99.99999% pure. 7-9 silicon is the low-grade stuff, and this is mainly used for things like photovoltaic cells. You get even more nines together, and you can make the chunks of silicon that end up in MOSFETs and computer chips and everything else like that.
I think this is a perfect example of the kind of article you would struggle to find anywhere else. You know, this is Hackaday through and through.
Yeah, right?
Like, Dan, I mean, he really grabbed onto this one and held on for dear life. I mean, he goes into the equations and everything, and it's not a light read. I won't lie to you. If you're out there listening to this and think you're going to check this out real quick, you're not. It's pretty in-depth, but it's fascinating stuff. I mean, it's the kind of thing where, you know, we take for granted a lot of stuff. We don't often think about the incredible difficulty and the engineering that goes into something that seems so simple on the surface, you know.
No, you just start with a silicon wafer, right? Like, how hard can that be?
How hard can it be? You know, and he talks about like how abundant this silicon is, but well,
yeah, it's just sand, right? They're just melting a bunch of sand.
Just because it's everywhere, like literally everywhere, doesn't mean turning it into a chip is a walk in the park.
You know, just the purifying it involves it getting incredibly hot with gaseous hydrochloric acid and things like this to clean it off. The fact that this is kind of containable and repeatable, and it's almost to the point where it's magic in a way, right? Like this is where the technology and the chemistry and, you know, getting something up to 11 nines of ultra super high purity, where it's really just silicon in that thing. I think that's what a lot of readers actually liked from this article. Like, if you read through the comments, everybody's like, yeah, great. Thank you for writing this down. I've always wondered how that goes. Nobody is in there in the comments going, this is too in-depth. So give it a read. You'll appreciate silicon more. You'll know more than you'll be able to remember at the next cocktail party, but at least you'll be able to explain some of why the world around us is absolutely amazing. That's all the time we have for this week's show. If it's Friday, you should go check out Remoticon. Otherwise, send us tips at the tip line. Check out the links in the show notes. Read more Hackaday. And
Keep on hacking.
this is madness. I think I'm going to bail out on this one. Hold on. Blah.
How do I start this? I was really interested in... No, I don't like that. Throw it all in the garbage. Throw it all in the garbage. All right, we gotta go all the way back. All the way back.
This one's not even a hack. This is not a hack.
Do it over. Do it over. Okay.
Let me double check that so that I don't say something stupid. Yes, that's correct. Get...
Very cool. I like that.